Pete Yost here for the Unbuild It podcast with a word about our sponsor, Huber Engineered Woods. There are really three reasons why I think Huber Engineered Woods stands out, and it's a big part of why they're a sponsor of our Unbuild It podcast. First, they develop systems of products. The products are compatible and integrated. Makes our jobs a lot more easy in the field and when specifying. Second is superior tech support. There are really good website resources that they have developed for the application of their products, but they also have an outstanding 800 numbered tech team that really knows their stuff. And the last is a really active technical research and development team with whom I've done a lot of work over the years, and I have a lot of faith in the information I get from them when I have questions about product performance. So that's it. That's our high performance sponsor. Now on to the podcast.
Hello, World of Unbuild It podcast. Welcome to the world headquarters, not global, world headquarters.
Home office.
So be it.
How about interstellar headquarters of the Unbuild It podcast?
But okay.
Yeah, let's go for it. We're going to be extremists today because guess what? Today's topic, everybody, is the BS of BS. That is the BS of building science, right? So we've all probably experienced it. I know I have. When you look at details or drawings and where the building science is just kind of exponentially gone interstellar. It's gone out into space. And I think there's a tipping point where, you know, certainly fundamental building science makes sense, but there's times where maybe it doesn't make sense. I'll give you an example. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, so this is when building science is taken to extreme. It's not necessarily that the science is extreme, it's how it's applied. Is that what the issue is?
Yeah, how it's applied. And sometimes, you know, I think the tail wags the dog. Like I was on this one, I visited this one project. They insulated under the slabs, and then they realized that they had to insulate behind the brick veneer, or there was something else, but their result was, well, we'll just run insulation down the outside of the foundation wall, around the footing and under the footing and up the inside and under the slab. And they did this in the footprint of the house was probably about 5,000 square feet.
Yikes.
So it was a huge undertaking to run insulation around the whole outside of the foundation and come up and seat the brick veneer on it as it turned in and went up behind the brick veneer at the brick shelf. And I remember being on the tour, and the builder I know very well, and actually we all know him very well. And I just...
Can I guess?
No. Can you guess? Can you guess? No. But no, he's a good guy trying to do the right thing. But he admitted that, you know, we kind of got behind it, and then the decisions kind of snowballed into, well, I guess since we did that, now we got to do this. And then that forced us to do this. And before you knew it, the train left the station. There were a bunch of bad ideas, and this thing was drifting off out of orbit, and it was gone. And it turned into craziness.
BS surpassing common sense.
Yeah. And when I said, well, what are the people going to use the basement? Because you figured, okay, if they went through all this trouble, then there's something good down here. Like, no, they're just going to use it for a little bit of storage. So a 5,000 square foot basement that uses maybe about 500 feet for storage. The rest of it was totally vacant, but it was fully insulated around the outside. So almost sounds like an Eminem song, but around the outside. Anyways. See,
if I had to have guessed that one of the three of us would make a hip hop reference, I would have guessed Pete instead of you.
Wow. They had hip hop in the 40s? Damn. I didn't know it was way back then. But don't you agree? I mean, there's some times I sit in on a lot of presentations. I like to. I think that we all have something to offer each other. So I never go into a presentation like, yeah, this person's really not worth listening to, because I think
I don't believe you on that one.
What's that?
I don't believe what you're about to say.
Well, no, I'm saying that you don't even know what I'm going to say. So shut up. I'm my point there was, before I was rudely interrupted, was it's not necessarily about the person speaking. It's the discussion that gets generated from that person speaking. So it could be somebody that maybe they're not, I don't consider them the best source of building science, but the discussion that gets generated here might be something that I can learn from. So I always listen in and watch these, but then I see some and I just sit back and go, am I really listening to this? Are they really doing that? And there's some things that I found that have become somewhat pet peeves of mine that I have done a couple times. I don't really think they make sense, and I tend to want to avoid them and argue against them. So
I think I'm following you here, and I'm going to offer one as an example to see if I'm on the right track. How's that sound?
Yes.
I think that the way that many people think about vapor and how concerned they are about, vapor pressure differences and that being a drive of the way that we construct, that's building science sort of taken to an extreme because the worry that we have over that is dwarfed by other concerns in the building, right?
Such as we spend all this time on our podcast talking about water and thermal and air movement, and yet you go to basically any building science conference except for maybe summer camp, and one of the major topics is vapor.
Where's the vapor barrier? If I put a detail up, I almost inevitably get the question, where's the vapor? How are you dealing with vapor in that detail? Yeah. What if I told you it's a 10,000 square foot house and it's owned by one person and they walk around there and they never cook? They eat out all the time. They have no pets. There's no vapor in the damn house.
And they like to use their outdoor shower.
And they leave the windows open all day long. Right? But yes. So in answer to your question, Peter, that is, so there's the extremism of what should I be worried about and what questions should I be asking? I'm always a proponent of, learning that you should ask the right questions, not necessarily have the right answer. But the details that I've seen, some of them are just outrageously crazy. And I'm like, I can't believe we're building that house.
And is some of this also climate tuned that we've always suffered from the fact that a lot of the building science came from cold climates, and people have a very hard time translating those into climates that are different than cold. Hence, the concern about interior vapor retarders in climates where it's silly because it's just not what's going to drive the performance of the building. So it's not just building science to the extreme. It's also not taking into account the impact that climate has on how that building science gets expressed in buildings.
So without there's no way to not sound demeaning on this, but there is the extremism of building science on the ignorant level, right? Like the extremist that just doesn't really know what they're talking about, but they want to talk about building science, and the big bad vapor monster is coming to get you.
Give me names. Who are you thinking about?
There's this guy in Missouri.
Jeez.
I'd like to point out that all three of us are in Missouri right now. Let's not.
Guy from Missouri.
Okay. I thought I found a loophole to get out from underneath that one.
But I have some examples, but I'm going to let Jake chime in before I get my example, because it will raise my blood pressure. I might get out of control, and I don't want to get out of control this early in the podcast. So,
it goes both ways, though, right? Like, we're talking about adding too much insulation or doing anything like that. The first example that comes to mind, I love the person that I'm going to talk about without naming their name. They continually make arguments that replacing your double pane windows with triple pane windows is not worth it, and you will not get your money back, and that it actually is a financial detriment for you to do so. And they completely ignore the idea that health and comfort are also part of the equation. Like, how many houses in the United States have west-facing walls with uncomfortable rooms late in the day in the summer, no matter the climate, that if they had triple glazed quality windows might not have that issue? You know, there's all these little things, the nuance that goes into it.
That one's even easier in the sense that a triple glazed window is a better performing window than a double glazed window. Hands down. They're the science, right? I mean, I'm not missing something there.
No, so, and it's just a question of how many attributes you add.
Yeah.
Because they're better soundproofing, they're better thermal performance.
But I'm saying from a thermal performance, just isolate it there. A triple glazed window is a better window.
Yeah.
And the windows are the worst part of any structure that we build. Maybe the doors and windows are probably the worst part. So if I have an opportunity to make the worst part of the house better, why wouldn't I choose that? That's an easy one. The ones that, and do you have more?
Well, and that same argument excludes the idea of like, okay, well, the house is 30 years old. The windows need to be replaced. Like and I'm using that one example because it came to mind when you brought this up, but that side of the argument of return on investment is such a horrible way to look at things. There's not a single other part of our house that's like a one specific thing like base shoe or door casing or doorknobs where we make the return on investment isn't there, so I'm not going to do it. Everything else is, I want it. It's aesthetically pleasing. It feels nice when I touch it. I like the way the shower head, I had a client buy a shower head and return it because they installed it at their personal house while we were building them a house and they didn't like the way that the shower head felt. That argument never gets applied beyond, like, it's so bizarre how the second we start talking about things that have to do with energy efficiency, where everything comes down to, do I get that dollar back when I fictitiously sell this house at some point?
I mean, that's definitely at the top of the list for BS on BS is what's the return on investment? Like, who's building a house based, and actually I had this where I challenged a client, and because he kept talking about the return on the investment, and I actually asked him, his name was Bob, and I said, Bob, you said this was your dream house, you're gonna die in this house. And he said, yes.
So I said, why are we talking
about what it gets sold for after you're dead?
Yeah. It's the same one that we always have when we remodel a master suite for people, and they go, well, we don't really want a tub, but we think we should put a tub in. Why? Well, because the tub, the house needs a tub.
The next couple wants that shower for two, I guarantee it.
Yeah, well, that's number one. Number two is, you just told me you're staying here the rest of your life. So you're going to pay for a tub so that your kids can get an extra $1,500 back on the sale of this home?
I've spent the last 30 years trying to figure out how the real estate industry has hooked architecture and building so well. Right, because they have. But beyond that,
because that's where the real money is in our industry.
Yeah. Beyond that we've kind of taken a left turn from my original. No, that's okay, because it's all BS on BS. But getting to the more extremism type stuff, there's a lot of people out there that I think believe we should only build a certified passive house. Like, we shouldn't build anything but that. In part of me, I hold them in somewhat high regard. Okay, it's kind of a lofty goal, but noble. But the reality is, and I think part of this is just working with Joe and Joe's belief that, listen, let's just take the 1 million homes that we build a year and make them 20% better. That's all. And that's an easy one to do, right? Passive house, as much of a noble idea as it is, it's a hard sell. It's a hard sell for me to do it. It literally is a hard sell for me to do it to a client because of the red tape that comes along with it. It adds work to what I have to do. It adds another consultant, another series of reviews that usually are just never painless.
So we kind of slipped from the building science extremism to
my extremism.
Okay, but I think one of the issues is, I think the three of us all have difficulty with programs that sort of it's the program that's the shiny medallion, as opposed to what's driving the performance behind it.
Well, that, and I see a lot of architects that do details, that do stuff that, like, why are you doing that? I don't quite understand what your concern is there.
And when you say that, you're talking about a principle sort of taken to extreme in the drawings so that it's either unbuildable or wouldn't work or would be incredibly expensive?
Or it's so far up the curve that it's almost flatlining up there, and we're spending a lot of money that doesn't make sense. So, without further ado, I'm going to dive into it.
Okay.
Over-insulating window frames.
I had a feeling this was coming.
Right. And I only say that because
Hold on. We should define what that is, because it's not putting too much insulation.
No.
It's insulating the outside of the window frame or the opening that the window frame is in order to try to bring the R value up of that opening.
Yes.
Commonly done with a rigid insulation of some sort.
Yes.
Okay.
Agreed.
And first practiced in pretty cold climates, mainly Alaska.
Yes, probably. Now, there probably is a case for it up there. Like if you get in climate zone 7+, let's say, then maybe, because at that point, the standard window isn't up to snuff for the climate it's being tuned for. Mm-hmm. So we need to over-tune it or have some external enhancement to the tuning.
Yeah. But we just stop living in those places. I know that's a common theme. Let's quit living in climate zone 8 and up. No,
so
I'm
not disparaging. People that live in Alaska.
No, we get
Alaska. I love Alaska.
We get it. You're wanted in Texas, so you move to Alaska. Just pick a different state. There's other states that you could have moved to. Sorry.
No, that's okay. But getting back to the over-insulating window frames, if we say zone 5, and I'm doing a passive house, and we have done this, and we over-insulated the frames. Well, it cost somewhere, and please verify this, Jake, being a builder, it was probably somewhere in like a $50 to $70 range to over-insulate the frames. Getting materials, cutting
per window, you're saying.
Per window. We had 35,
more than that
35 windows. So let's just say $50 just because it's easy math, right? The house is a passive house. So without the over-insulated frames, we were under $100 a month for, or $100. Yeah, $100. Sorry. Yes, under $100 a month for annual everything, all energy, all in. Heating, cooling, hot water.
All the loads.
That's
pretty impressive.
It was, and it's a 2,600 square foot house. So we already get that down. And when you show people, oh, well, we modeled that, the isotherms, and look at here, that thing glows. Well, yeah, something has to be the worst part of the house. There's always going to be a worst part of the house. It's not a secret. If I fix that, guess what? It just moves down the line somewhere else and something else becomes. But anyways, 35 windows. Let's just say $50. That's $1,750. Is that right? Did I do the math right?
Something like that.
$1,750. $1,800 to do those windows because we throw in some money for coffee breaks. So $1,800 to over-insulate those windows. When we reran the numbers with insulated windows, how many dollars do you think it took off the energy bill?
I'm going to say
$10 a year.
Yeah, it was probably something like about $1.75, $1.50
a month.
So not that I want to bring in return on investment.
I was about to say that. You beat me to it.
So here we are killing ourselves with our own pet peeves. But $1,750, that's 175 years before I get my money back on that. And so, and we had done it on one house and we found that the insulation was actually holding water. So, and luckily we found it before all the windows were fully trimmed out and stuff, because the builder, and it was his own house, we had to go back and he pulled it all out and he said, I will never put insulation on the outside of the window frames again. And I'm wondering now if he covered up the weep holes. I know we've had conversations, but if that wasn't the problem and then created a dam. But I've actually sat in on a presentation online, like 200 people watching this thing. The architect shows a detail where the window frames are over-insulated. Everybody's clapping, ooh, ah, all of this. And then he lets in that, yeah, they found out it was holding water. So, but they didn't rip the insulation out. They drilled holes up through the insulation.
Well, they added weeps.
And they added weeps. So it's like, let's make a really bad idea this half-assed solution idea, because somehow we believe that we have to over-insulate the frame.
I think it's interesting that when we talk about BS to extremism, I wonder what our tolerance is along the order of priority: water, air, vapor, and thermal. Probably we're going to find more examples of absurdism along the insulation lines than we are, the continuous water control and air control layers, because we tend to make those pretty absolute.
Right.
You've got to manage the water, got to manage the air.
Okay, so I have your comment at the very end of your statement, Steve, about belief. I have the other thing that came to mind as soon as you said BS extremist is that material has to be in every house. Every house that we do can't have this, or it has to have this. The current argument of, well, spray foam needs to be quit being used, period. Across the board, spray foam is the worst thing you could do for a house. It's horrible well, first of all, they have GWP spray foam that's like 1 now. So,
and they're Green Guard certified. Are you familiar with Green Guard certification? Mm-hmm. I'm assuming that's really good. I'm not totally up on it.
It's considered an industry standard in terms of evaluating the indoor air quality profile of a
so it never fails. I put up a conversation about, say, the house that I built for myself that has a 2-inch splash of spray foam on the inside of a 2x8 wall with zip bar on the outside. And people go, well, why did you choose to use spray foam? Like, everybody in the room knows that I shouldn't have used spray foam, and I have to make an argument to use a really good high quality insulation. Like, I'm the one that has to propose that it's, or the other thing is that we hear all the time now from, as Joe would call them, the greenie weenie community of, well, if you're not building with wood fiber insulation, you're being a detriment to the industry. One material is not the solution. When we talk about the right material is the one that can be installed properly, if we apply that, plus it's thoughtful and we're not purposely damaging the environment or purposely causing health issues for our clients, there are a million ways to skin the proverbial cat here. Why is it that we get stuck on this material is the thing that we have to have in all of our houses, says the person that builds with zip on almost every single house?
Yeah, I mean, I think most of what we're discussing here is kind of beyond our control and a lot bigger than any one of us in the industry. And I agree with you that, like, one material is neither the death of the industry nor is it the saving grace of the industry. And there's just so many factors that are behind every one of those decisions beyond just the material. And, people talk about embodied energy and all of this stuff, but there's a ton of that stuff that comes along with the package. But there's also the things that, like, people don't want to talk about when they get challenged. I've heard people say, oh, you don't want to use spray foam. That's bad. Okay, I put my hand up. Why is it bad? And they don't really have a reason. Oh, it's harmful to the environment. Okay.
So
you building a house is harmful to the environment.
Yeah. So I think a really good resource on this is Building Green has something called the Special Report Series, and they have a special report on insulation. It's about 90 pages. They just updated it for the 4th edition. And I use this all the time with architectural firms that come to me and say, it's really important to us that we try to include in materials that have lower impact. And the reason I like to use their report is because they lay out all the different parameters that you can consider, and then they have a summary table at the end. And so if you want to avoid, more energy intensive materials, they rank them, but it's always in the context of how many attributes are you going to include in your decision-making process? This is not something that is easy to talk with clients about because it's a really complicated topic and it can glaze over
every
very
material
quickly
in the house. And
but if somebody comes to you and says, I'm working with an architect right now who said the client has come forward and said, we need to do the best job we can on the environmental profile of building materials. Well, that's another lens through
But what is the best job, right? Because I've done a house where a woman came to me and said, I don't want any adhesives in my house. Mm-hmm. Right. So all of the floor sheathing was boards. All of the wall sheathing was boards. We couldn't use any glues, no sealants, nothing. You want to see the framers. Like, they were like, you want us to do what?
Is that what happens when you have YouTube and you stay up too late?
And the structural engineer, no, she was authentically sick from what I've heard from other people, that she just couldn't. She was very sensitive to
Authentically Sick is a good band name, by the way.
There you go. But even the structural engineer, when I sent it to him, he's like, you really want to do this? And I was like, we don't have an option.
Yeah.
It's not. And that's what she wanted to do. And I told her, I said, this is probably going to be like twice the price. She's like, I don't care what it is. I can't not do it. And so there is some level of extremism that we have to do sometimes, I think. But I guess my point is if you're a young builder or a young architect, or you just recently went on your own, that you look at some of these other people that are doing some stuff and you go, oh my God, look at that. That is wild. That is crazy. That is so cool. No, chances are it's probably really expensive. It's a crazy client that wants to do something crazy. And I can speak to this because I'm speaking from experience. I have a client right now. We're doing a wall system and I'm like, I really hope we can build this, because this is building science extreme. But it's not your common wall. Although I will say it's in the north, up near the Canadian border. It's in the middle of a field. I was up there in like May, June, and I was freezing when the wind blew. So I can't even imagine what it is at the end of January up there. But there's like, concentrate on the smaller things and getting them right rather than trying to reinvent the wheel. There are a lot of materials out there that solve problems. They solve problems very well. And I don't think we have to try and reinvent the wheel to do it. That I'm very comfortable. I mean, a lot of the projects that Jake and I do, they're 2x6 wall, 24 inches on center, zip R9, fill the cavity with, cellulose. It's a vented roof with blown cellulose. That's a real simple. If I did a presentation on it, people are like, so what?
Yeah.
There's nothing really crazy here. No, but you know what? It's a real successful wall system, wall assembly that works extremely well. And you put a triple glazed window in that, I can put that almost anywhere in the country. And be successful.
Healthy and comfortable and energy
Sleep
efficient.
well, dream well, etc. And it's not crazy.
I'm just about to start dreaming myself here.
We got to a real kumbaya moment there at the end.
We started out with extremism, and we sort of settled down after that. I've already got the Pete's resources all lined up.
Let's hear it.
Go ahead.
We're in the wrap up.
Well, where the special report from Building Green is on insulation is a great way of looking at all the different perspectives that you can when you're selecting materials. And then when Steve and I were working at Building Science Corporation, it was all about climate-tuned building performance. And so Building Science Corporation has designs that work. They have enclosures that work. The Building America Solution Center has climate-tuned solutions. And I think that's a big part of this, is that what can look pretty commonplace in one climate is not necessarily meaning that you can transfer it to the other climate without making climate adjustments. So I do like the idea of applying building science by climates.
Wow. How come you get your own section? Like, he gets Pete resources. I need like Steve.
I was the only one who volunteered
do you want to go through the effort of dealing with that?
I'll do like Steve jokes. So the other day I saw my wife. She was carrying a laundry basket and she tripped and fell. And I watched the situation unfold.
Thank you.
We are going to let Steve be in charge of the Unbuilt It Podcast joke department. Whoa.
Okay. Well, thank you guys for joining me on the podcast today. Thank you to our listeners for joining us on the podcast today. Thanks. Hopefully you're watching on YouTube and then you're going to listen to it so that you can check to see if the two are the same, because I doubt anybody knows whether or not they are. I do. Do you, Pete?
I normally listen to both. Or
Okay.
Both what?
Pete knows that the
YouTube and
YouTube video and the published podcast, the audio version, are the same.
Well, you
Or at
can't
least
see your
he's gonna
smiling
pretend.
face if I listen to it on.
I see it up here,
Spotify.
my smiling face all the time.
All right.
Thanks again. Click subscribe if you're going to watch on YouTube. Tell a friend, leave a review. And gentlemen, till next time, have a good day.
Till next time.
Good night.